Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for an all new episode recap of today's Daysofourlives, April 14, 2025. So we'll start off with Sean and Rafe, right? So the long overdue conversation that needed to be had about what happened between his fiance Jada and Sean, right? So he asked Sean point blank, like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And it's like, it was just a one time thing, and it was all because of what happened with, Vinegar and, Jada being devastated. And he's like, I understand that you and I can't be friends anymore, but don't take it out on Jada. Jada was really a wreck when it all happened, and I just really care for her. So he's like, care for her? You have feelings for her? So it's like, no, that's not what I meant. And he's like, I just heard you say you care for her. So what is it, right? So he got interrupted from a call from the station. So he said that he would be back. So he's like, don't leave, Rafe, we gotta like finish the conversation. So Rafe is there, and he's waiting, and he sees Jada's blouse, or I guess a shawl or something like that, on the dresser table, right? So he's like, doesn't seem like it's a one-time thing. So by the time Sean gets back, Rafe leaves, right? So Rafe is gonna think, okay, maybe it happened another time and it wasn't just a one-time thing, and he's thinking that they slept together another time. So I'm saying Rafe here just putting two and two together. It could be just that they just she just spent the night there because she didn't have nowhere to go. But she could have asked, maybe Stephanie was busy, why she couldn't stay with Stephanie. But like, this could have been simply, tidied up a little bit so that, Rafe doesn't jump to conclusion. But he's just been, overdoing it lately. So again, they decided to pair up Chanel and Paulina again for yet another sit down conversation, which I really wasn't here for, because it was really just them talking about EJ. And Paulina was upset with Chanel about how she could, how Chanel could think that she would have anything to do with EJ shooting. So she's like, it's not like that. It's just that when she first said to her that she had something to confess to her, she thought she had something to do with it. And she said, no, I had nothing to do with it, as you know, right? So anyways, she apologizes, and it was really that, same old conversation repeated about how Chanel is worried about Johnny, and she hasn't heard back from him, and she doesn't know what to do, and he's been in a bad place, and all of that. It's nothing really to really discuss here, guys. It's just the same old conversation. So back to Kate and Roman, who both had something to discuss with each other. So Kate went first and told him that Vivian Alamin is back out, and he's surprised to hear about that. And he's like, what is she up to now? So she said that she went straight to Philip, wanting a piece of his inheritance, since he got part ownership of the company. So he's like, why would she think that she's entitled to that? So of course Kate can't go into specifics here. She just said that Vivian, we don't really know how she thinks she's certified, insane and all of that. So Roman's like, I can't argue with you there, right? So she asked him what he had to tell her, right? So they did get interrupted by somebody, but we'll talk about that later down the line. They did get back to the conversation, and Roman did tell her that Rex happened to find her gun in her drawer. So she's like, what is Rex doing there? So he said that he was looking for a pen, and he ended up seeing that. So she's like, it's no surprise I own a gun. And he's like, Rex is wondering if you really took it to heart about what happened to him and the hit and run and EJ's possible involvement. And she's like, I can't have Philip and Rex thinking I could possibly be a shooter and all of that. So do you believe that I'd have nothing to do with it? So he's like, he kept having flashback of him getting his own gun out of the safe. And then, he came back out of it, and he said to Kate that, I do believe you. I told Rex that he had nothing to do with it. So he was hugging her, and she felt relieved. But, he kept having this flashback about him taking out his own gun. So I guess we have to keep an eye on Roman, but I don't think it's him either. So back to Xander and Philip, and, him finding out that, Vivian is here. So he's like, what is she doing here? So she said, I think you should ask your brother about that. And she tells him boldface that, hey, I'm moving in. So he's like, you're delusional more than I thought. Like, what's going on here? Like, Maggie does not like you after all that you done to her, bearing her life. So she's like, oh, she was above God. She was okay. So he's like, how is this okay? Like, me and Philip are going to kick you out. So he's like, I don't think he's going to help you with that. So Xander is looking at Philip like, why would you allow this woman to move in here and, unless she has something over you. So Philip was there, caving in, you know, looking all nervous. So he said, you know what, forget it. Like, you have part ownership. You get to choose who stays over your side of the house. So, forget about it. But, like, you're going to tell Maggie why she's in here, right? So he leaves. And, you know, you know, Vivian is saying to Philip, like, okay, I thought you was gonna tell him. So he's like, I almost did, So anyway, she said that, this will all be over once Kate decides to off Xander, and then, we'll be all good. I will not tell him a secret. Your secret is safe with me, right? So, yeah, this is definitely gonna be a one big miss. And on that last thing with Vivian too, I'm saying like Victor would definitely be rolling his grave just to see this lady come back into his place. Like, it is just the disrespect of it all, right? So anyways, we see Paulina and Jada. Paulina needs an update from Jada about the EJ Demare shooting case because she's tired of saying no comment to the public. So she needs some answers. So she said that at this point we do have Kristen in custody, however, still waiting on the findings from the ballistic report about the bullet that was lodged into EJ. They're still working on that and to compare it with the gun that Kristen had in her purse. So, Pauline is saying, like, what motive does she really have? So she said, her mom, Rachel Blake, went missing, and we were thinking that EJ possibly, sent her away so that she wouldn't testify against him. So maybe it is, causing her to be angry and, try to off her own brother. So Paulina understands the theory. So, she said, like, so can we really work out with that? So Jada said we have to wait until the next day to find out the actual results. We can't hold Kristen for longer than 24 hours, so we just gotta wait until the morning. So Paulina says, okay, then you need to leave. Then, we need you at your best shape to really, take on these cases. So Jada is saying to Paulina that she cannot really go nowhere. She has nowhere to go. And she said, what do you mean? So she's telling, like, I don't really have nowhere to go. So she's like, you and Ray haven't started out things. So she said, no, we're still at odds. And she's like, don't worry, the night is still young. He will come to his senses, right? So that was it with them. So there was a quick scene with Sammy and Johnny. So Sammy was still on the phone with Johnny's sister Sydney, and she was telling her that she doesn't have any update, on her father's condition, and that they don't know who shot him as yet, right? So the call ended, and she and Johnny get to talk briefly. And Johnny's saying that he's gonna go home, just really think about things. So she said that she was gonna go over to his grandpa room and check in with him. So she was inviting him, but that's when he said he had to go home, just really take a breather. So she understands, and she says, go be with your wife and all that. So she was gonna ask him a question, possibly about if he had anything to do with his father's shooting, but she just said, never mind, right? So that's when he left. So Johnny went home to Chanel, and Chanel was like, I was worried about you. What happened? So he's like, I turned my phone off. I actually went to the hospital, because my Uncle Chad was really, making sense of what it is, and that I needed to, just have closure with my dad. He may not be here for long, so might as well I just say my piece with him. So she's like, how did that go? So it's like, it went unexpectedly because I ran into my mom too. So she's like, Sammy's in town. So it's like, yeah, and we got to have a heart to heart, and I understood, why she did what she did and why she ended up with my dad after what he did to her. So, we had some, somewhat of a closure, but then, I'm made peace with that. I can't I'm never gonna really understand why she really rekindled things with him, right? So, anyways, as it is with my dad, like I don't know how to feel. It's complicated. I try to see the good in him, and I think about the good moments. I think about this one moment where it was Christmas, and me and Sydney had all the gifts, and he didn't let us have any of them. Instead, he told us to, like, send them off to donation to really teach us the importance of giving back. So I'm saying, how could the same guy, do all these things, and I grew up to know who he was. He wasn't a saint and all that. So I don't know if I'll ever make peace with what he did to my mom. Like, I don't know if I can forgive that. It makes me so angry. So I feel like, should I feel bad for feeling this way? So, Chanel is saying your feelings are validated. Like, you're entitled to feel how you feel, right? So it's like, I just wish that my dad would go through some consequences of what he did. And she was telling him how her mom was looking into charge, opening up the case between him and his mom. And she's like, it doesn't make sense because I don't think my mom would want to go through that. And she said, yeah, the statute of limitations is passed, but my mom was still looking into it. So it's like, it doesn't make sense because I don't think my dad is going to be alive for long. So, anyways, Chanel says, think about the good things in life, and, including her. And he said, yeah, I appreciate you. So they just go to bed, I guess, and that was it. So Sammy goes over to pay her dad a visit, and Kate, you know, exchange, pleasantries and whatever, cordial. So she told Roman that she was there to check in on EJ's condition and also to talk to Johnny, and they had a good heart to heart, and that was really that. So he's glad to hear that because he said that he's been trying to get through to her. So he's happy that they had that talk, and Kate feels bad for opening her mouth to Johnny about it, and Roman as well. So she's like, I don't blame none of you because it really went well as unexpected. So she's happy that it turned out better than she thought. So anyways, Roman was offering her, I guess, dinner to stay with him and Kate, and he was telling her that Rex was in town. So she's like, hopefully I get to see him before I leave. And she, declined an offer to have dinner with them because she has one more stop to make. Jada comes back over to Sean's place to pack up her things, and he's like, if you still need a place to crash, I'm still available. So she's like, no, Stephanie is allowing me to come over to her place, so I'm good on that. And he said that before you go, I need to let you know that Rafe was over here, was there to talk to me about what happened between you and I. And I kept it really simple, and he seemed as if he was understanding where you was coming from. So she's like, where is he? So it's like, I don't know. When I came back from my call from the office, he was not here. So she's like, did you tell him that I slept the night over here? So he's like, no, I didn't, because I didn't want him to come to conclusion. So I'm like, that's too late, because he found a piece of garment from her, and he's thinking different things about her now. So at this point, I just think this relationship is doomed. Rafe is not trying to see the bigger picture or try to understand a little bit more. He's, instead of like communicating with Sean about what's the meaning of that, or to talk to Jada about that, he's just thinking again more conclusions, right? So Rafe is over there again thinking about different conclusions about Jade and Sean. And he gets a knock at the door, and it's Sammy. Surprises his Sammy back in town, and Sammy just comes in. And she said that she had to come back to see Johnny. They had a heart to heart about what happened, and he's like, I did talk to Johnny the other day, and get him to see that it wasn't really your fault. And she said, yeah, Johnny told me about that, and I just had to come over here to thank you for just really giving him a different perspective. And it's good that he still respects your opinion or thoughts on this. So it's like, I'm glad that I could help, but you didn't come all the way to say that, right? So she said, not really. Like, she also just want to check in on him. And at some point they start talking about his relationship, and how it didn't go well because Vinegar came into town on EJ's. EJ was working alongside him yet again, and it caused him the demise of his relationship. And he was engaged, and Jada slept with Sean while this was all happening, while he was away. And Sammy was like, I mean, she should have told you at first, but come on now, you can't really fault her for that. Like, it wasn't her fault. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to understand that, but I'm not mad about it. I'm mad about the fact that she didn't know it was the real me. So she was like, how, come on now, Rafe, you don't you think you're overreacting here? So it's like, yeah, but then I went over to talk to Sean, and then I saw, her blouse over there. So now I'm thinking it wasn't a one-time thing. So now it's just thought about that, and Sammy starts talking about, just looking into things that she thought about her relationship history, how EJ and her were toxic, and she said the healthiest relationship she has ever been in was with Rafe. And he was thinking the same thing. So yeah, and they leaned in for a kiss. But I liked their relationship back in the day as well, if you guys know about the Sammy and Rafe era. But yeah, I like them together. But let's see how this is gonna play out with Jada in the back, huh? So that is it for today's episode recap. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to my channel, comment below your thoughts. I will see you guys tomorrow.